The soldier should have died the moment the whistle blew, but instead, he vanished into the smoke like a man walking willingly into his own myth. That was the first line I ever read in the forbidden dossier, the file they told us did not exist. The page was yellowed, brittle at the edges, and stamped with a classification code older than my father. Archive 7, unauthorized access prohibited. But the part that haunted me most wasn't the stamp. It was the handwriting. Trembling, rushed, human. A witness. A survivor. Someone who saw the impossible. At the time, I believed none of it. The war had already taught me that stories grow wild in ruins, that myths sprout from cratered soil. Yet something about that single sentence grabbed the back of my mind like a clenched fist and refused to let go. I kept reading. I couldn't stop. And just like that, the 7 buried secrets, erased from textbooks, shredded from reports, and denied in every official account, began unfolding before me. The first secret began on the eve of an operation so classified the soldiers fighting in it didn't know it had a name. The Allies were burning through manpower, stretched thin across every front, and desperate enough to attempt something unthinkable, sending a unit behind enemy lines with no promise of extraction. They called the group Section E. Not Special Forces. Not reconnaissance. Just a letter. A placeholder. Disposable. But buried in that roster was a man who should never have been there at all, Lieutenant Adrian Graham. The file said he'd been reassigned after disciplinary complications. The redacted lines suggested a different story. And the final paragraph hinted at something else entirely. Unconfirmed field reports suggest Subject G exhibited impossible resilience during the operation. Further evaluation required upon return. He never returned. At least, not officially. The next page described the night Section E crossed the threshold, an abandoned lattice of farmlands now riddled with frost and landmines. The moon was thin, strangled by clouds, and the silence was suffocating. Even the wind felt afraid to move. But Graham? He walked at the front. A figure carved from tension. Jaw locked tight. Eyes carrying something heavier than the pack on his shoulders. Corporal Hale, whose signature marked the entry, wrote, he didn't look like he was preparing for the mission. He looked like a man who had already accepted he would die in it. Still, Graham's presence steadied the group. He had a reputation, rumors passed between exhausted camps about a soldier who could keep marching when others collapsed, who could rally broken men with nothing but his voice. Some swore they saw him survive things no one should. Others dismissed it as wartime exaggeration. But Hale believed it. He's different, he wrote. And tonight, it feels like we're about to learn why. Their objectives seemed simple on paper: infiltrate a derelict village where the enemy was rumored to be developing a weapon that could shift the balance of the war. Intelligence was vague, contradictions stacked on contradictions, but reports mentioned 2 chilling words: Resonance Project. Graham, however, seemed to know more. Hale noted how he kept glancing toward the treeline, scanning with an urgency that didn't match the orders they'd been given. When the squad questioned him, he brushed it off. But his hands shook. The strongest man in the platoon, trembling. What did he know? What had he seen? None of them would get the chance to ask. Hale described the ambush with sharp, fragmented strokes, like someone writing while his hands were still shaking. One moment the squad moved in silence, the next, gunfire tore through the night like claws ripping open the sky. Men fell before they knew what hit them. The darkness erupted with muzzle flashes, screams, and orders swallowed by chaos. Hale dove behind a broken irrigation ditch. 2 others didn't get that far. The attack was surgical. Ruthless. Precise. But amid the carnage, Graham did something impossible. He stood. Not recklessly. Not bravely. Purposefully. He rose from cover as if the bullets weren't meant for him at all. Hale saw it, swore by it. Graham stepped into the open, lifted his rifle, and fired single, deliberate shots that cut through the enemy line with terrifying accuracy. But that wasn't the impossible part. Not yet. A burst of gunfire caught him in the chest, 3 rounds, Hale estimated, and Graham staggered. It looked fatal. Should have been fatal. He dropped to one knee. Blood spread across his uniform. Then, he rose again. Slowly. Steadily. Like a man refusing the laws that bind every other soldier to the earth. Hale froze. The squad froze. Even the attackers hesitated, confused. And Graham used that hesitation. He pushed forward, charging into the hail of fire like a force of nature. Hale described the moment with disbelief carved into every word. He moved like he wasn't afraid of dying. Or as if dying had already happened to him once. By the time the squad regrouped, the attackers were retreating, scattershot shapes disappearing between shattered fences and burning fodder. But the victory felt hollow. Half the team lay wounded. 2 wouldn't survive the hour. Graham said nothing. Just stood there breathing hard, staring at the direction the attackers fled. Like he recognized them. Like he expected them. When dawn crept over the horizon, the surviving members of Section E continued toward their target. Hale noted Graham walking separately from the group, shoulders heavy, gaze fixed on some distant point only he could see. And then Hale wrote something I cannot forget. I think he knows the truth about this mission. A truth the rest of us were never meant to learn. This was the beginning. Secret 1. The crack in the facade the war never wanted us to see. As I closed the first section of the dossier, I realized something chilling. Whatever Graham was running from, whatever the Resonance Project truly meant, this mission was no ordinary assignment. It was bait. And he was the one they were trying to catch. The village appeared through the thinning fog like a ghost dragged reluctantly into the waking world, silent, skeletal, and wrong in every way a place could be wrong. Section E stopped the moment they saw it. Even the wind, which had been pushing cold across the field all morning, seemed to draw back. Corporal Hale described the sight in a way that gnawed at me. It looked abandoned. But not empty. Like something inside it was holding its breath, waiting for us to step closer. Graham stood at the front of the formation again. His uniform was torn, blood-stained, and stiff from the dried impact of bullets that should have killed him, yet his posture looked almost steady. As if crossing into the village meant stepping somewhere familiar. Somewhere feared. The others followed at a distance, exchanging worried glances. The previous night's ambush had shaken them deeply, losing comrades, seeing the impossible, it all hung over them like a shroud. But no one dared speak of Graham. Not yet. Not out loud. Not when every unspoken question threatened to turn into panic. As they neared the first building, a collapsed barn with its roof caved in like a crushed ribcage, Hale noticed something else. Every door in the village was open. Not wide. Just a crack. Enough to signal invitation, or warning. Private Corwin muttered, "This place is cursed." Graham didn't look back, but he said, "Quiet." His voice was calm. Too calm. The kind of calm you heard from someone who knew the danger by name. They moved inward, checking corners, watching windows, clearing each structure in slow, controlled movements. The buildings were filled with half-finished meals, overturned chairs, coats still hanging by the door. Life had been here. Moments ago, maybe. But the people? Gone. Vanished. Hale noted chicken feathers scattered on the ground as if a fight had broken out. Not human. Not normal. Something tore through the village with precision. Private Donner whispered, "What weapon does that?" Nobody answered. Because the truth was becoming obvious, this wasn't a battlefield. It was a testing ground. And whatever had been tested, worked. At the village square, they found the first body. A young soldier. Not one of theirs. Enemy uniform, but stripped of insignia, as if whoever left him didn't want the corpse connected to anything official. His eyes were open. Staring. Glassy. Terrified. But Hale wrote something stranger. His face looked frozen in a soundless scream, like the terror hit him all at once, like it wasn't fear of dying, but fear of something he saw. No bullet wounds. No shrapnel. No knife marks. Just a thin line of dried blood at the ears. Donner stepped back. Pressure shock, he suggested. Hale felt the air shift. From what? There's no crater. No blast zone. Only Graham knelt beside the body. He touched the man's neck with 2 fingers, then closed the corpse's eyes gently. An act of respect. But his expression changed. Grief. Recognition. Fear. Graham whispered something under his breath that Hale couldn't hear. When he stood, he finally spoke, "We shouldn't be here." Corwin exhaled sharply. "We figured that out last night." "No," Graham said, turning toward the far end of the square. "You don't understand. This place isn't abandoned. They evacuated it. Forced everyone out before the test." Donner swallowed. "Test of what?" Graham looked at the team with a gaze that sliced straight through them. "The resonance device." The words landed like stones in a pond, ripples spreading through each man as realization sank in. They weren't behind enemy lines on reconnaissance. They were inside the blast radius of something unearthly. Hale grabbed his arm. "You knew?" Graham didn't deny it. Didn't lie. He simply said, "I survived the last one." The confession shattered the group's fragile sense of safety. The last one? The device had already been used? Hale pressed him, voice tightening. "What does it do, Lieutenant?" Graham didn't answer immediately. Instead, he walked toward a building at the far edge of the square, its door also cracked open like the others. The squad trailed behind him reluctantly, every step echoing with dread. The door creaked as Graham pushed it wider. Inside were rows of cages. Empty. Metal twisted and warped. Locks melted from the inside out. Corwin whispered, "Animals." "Test subjects," Graham said. "Before they tried it on people." He looked at the ceiling. At the walls. At everything except the men beside him. "That's why we're here. They want to see what happens to a trained unit. Whether soldiers react differently. How the mind cracks under pressure." Hale's voice trembled. "And the ambush last night?" "Containment team," Graham said. "Sent to keep us from getting this far." The truth bent something inside the group, twisting anger, betrayal, confusion into something volatile. They were pawns in an experiment disguised as a mission. Donner slammed a fist into the wall. "Why us? Why send our squad?" Graham's eyes lowered. He hesitated. And for the first time, emotion cracked through his controlled exterior. "They weren't supposed to send all of you." Silence. A thick, suffocating silence. Corwin stepped forward, voice frantic. "What does that mean?" Graham swallowed, hard. "This mission wasn't meant for a team. It was meant for me." The men stared. Processing. Breaking. Hale felt rage ignite in his chest. "So we were collateral?" Graham didn't flinch. "Yes." Before anyone could react, before Hale could throw the punch he was winding up, before Corwin could curse, before Donner could scramble for answers, a hum began. Low. Deep. Vibrating through the floorboards. It crawled into their bones. Hale described it in words that still chill me. The air felt like it was shivering. Like something was trying to pull itself into existence. The resonance device had activated. Graham looked at them with urgency, fear sharpening every line of his face. "It's starting," he said. "We don't have long." Hale grabbed his pack. "How do we stop it?" Graham shook his head. "We don't. We run." But when the hum grew louder, so loud it bent the light in the air, running wasn't an option anymore. Because something else had woken inside the village. Something watching them. Something that had been waiting. Hale would later write that the moment the resonance device activated, the world seemed to fold inward, like reality itself was shuddering under an invisible strain. The floorboards trembled. Dust spiraled through the air in unnatural patterns, curving in tight, slow vortices that hovered mid-air as though caught in a breath that refused to exhale. The hum deepened. It wasn't sound anymore. It was pressure. It pressed behind the eyes, at the base of the spine, inside the marrow. Corwin clamped both hands over his ears. Make it stop, make it stop. But no one could make it stop. And no one dared to move. Except Graham. He stood perfectly still, body tense, jaw locked as if bracing against a memory clawing its way back into the present. Hale watched the color drain from his face. It was fear, but not the kind that comes from danger. This was recognition. The same sound had marked the first test. The event Graham alone survived. And now it had found him again. Lieutenant. Hale grabbed him by the shoulder. Graham. What do we do? Graham's lips parted, but for a moment he couldn't speak. His eyes flicked toward the center of the village, as though he expected something or someone to appear there. Finally he whispered, "We stay together. No matter what happens, we stay together." Another pulse ripped through the air. The windows rattled. The ground trembled. Corwin stumbled backward into a cage, metal clanging loudly. And that was when they heard it. Not the hum. Not the vibration. A voice. Not human. Not mechanical. A layered whisper carried on a frequency that didn't match anything the men had ever known. A static-laced murmur slipping between the pulse waves, forming syllables that twisted the air. Return. Donner's face drained. Did you hear that? Hale nodded slowly. Not possible. Graham exhaled shakily. It's beginning sooner than I thought. They moved as a group toward the doorway, boots crunching over fractured tiles, hearts pounding in uneven, frantic rhythms. As the hum intensified, the village seemed to warp subtly, angles bending, shadows stretching too long, colors fading at the edges. Donner froze in the threshold. Look! The square was no longer empty. A figure stood in the center, half-shrouded in fog. Motionless. Watching. Its outline flickered, like a projection struggling to stabilize. One moment tall. The next hunched. Then split into two silhouettes before snapping back into one. Corwin's voice trembled. That's not a man. Hale felt ice crawl up his spine. Graham. What the hell is that thing? Graham did not answer. Because in the flickering movements, in the stuttering posture of the figure, he recognized something familiar. A uniform. A shape. A memory burned into him. Hale saw realization strike him like a physical blow. Lieutenant? Hale whispered. Graham stepped forward, throat tight. That's one of ours. The others recoiled as though struck. A soldier? Impossible. Donner shook his head rapidly. He's dead, Graham. Look at him. He's dead. But the silhouette lifted its head, as though hearing its name. The fog shifted. A face appeared, gray, distorted, the eyes empty pits of shimmering static. And yet, Hale recognized him too. Private Markson. Killed 3 months earlier. Lost behind enemy lines on a mission labeled unsalvageable. They'd never recovered the body. Until now. The figure moved, jerking, twitching, each motion disjointed as if some unseen puppeteer was tugging limbs along invisible strings. Hale felt something primal claw at his gut. This wasn't resurrection. Or survival. It was reanimation. A body pulled into resonance with something that didn't belong in the human world. Corwin whispered, "Dear God." Graham stepped forward. "Markson," he called out softly. The figure stopped. Its head tilted. Static rippled across its face. The jaw moved, slow, grinding, unnatural. And then, in a voice that sounded like a man speaking through broken radio equipment, "Graham," Corwin nearly collapsed. Donner swore under his breath. But Hale watched Graham. And for a moment, just a moment, he saw the lieutenant tremble. Not from fear. From guilt. Graham whispered, "They used him. Just like the others." "The others?" Donner snapped. "What others?" Graham's silence was answer enough. Markson, or what was left of him, took one staggering step forward. Then another. Each footfall synchronized with a rising pitch in the resonance. Halos of distortion warped the air around his body. Hale grasped his rifle instinctively. "Lieutenant. Tell me we're allowed to shoot." Graham shook his head. "No. It won't matter." Donner snarled, "Then what does matter?" "Getting to the device," Graham said. "It's pulling them in. Using their bodies as conduits. We shut it down, they stop coming." Hale's stomach lurched. "They? How many are there?" As if in response, more silhouettes emerged from the fog behind Markson. 8, 10, 12, faces half-formed, uniforms torn, eyes flickering like broken bulbs. A procession of the lost. And they were all coming straight towards Section E. Corwin panicked. "We'll be overrun, Graham, we're going to die here." Graham's voice hardened. "Not if we move now." But before the squad could react, Markson broke into a run. It was not a human run. It was fast, jerking, a blur of impossible angles. Donner fired. The bullet went through the apparition, tearing a hole that rippled like liquid light before sealing instantly. Useless. The entity slammed into Donner with a force that sent him crashing into a stone wall. His scream cut off abruptly. Hale rushed forward, dragging Donner away. The private's chest heaved in jagged, desperate breaths. His ribs were cracked. Possibly more. Markson turned his head toward the rest of the group. Graham shouted, "Move! To the church, now!" Hale hauled Donner to his feet. Corwin grabbed ammo. Graham covered their flank. Together they sprinted through the village as more silhouettes broke into that horrific, inhuman run. The church loomed ahead, its doors hanging loose, its bell tower fractured. They dove inside just as the figures swarmed the square behind them. The door slammed shut. Graham braced it with a fallen beam. Hale gasped for breath. Corwin sobbed silently. Donner coughed blood. Graham finally spoke. Voice low. Steady. Haunted. "This is secret number 2, he said. The dead weren't lost." He stared at the shaking door, where silhouettes pounded from the other side. They were taken. The train shot north through the dark like a bullet made of steel and secrets. Every window reflected only shadows, and every shadow seemed to watch. Intelligence Officer Elara Voss kept her gloved hand wrapped around the leather satchel chained to her wrist. Inside it lay a single sheet of faded parchment, its edges singed, its ink smudged, and its truth heavier than any classified document she had ever carried. It was secret number 4, the Cipher of Ghosts, a coded message historians later pretended had never existed. She replayed the words of Commander Wren, who had handed it to her with trembling fingers hours earlier. "When you understand it, you'll know why they buried it. Why they will kill to bury you too." The satchel felt colder than the night itself. The train without stops, the Nightline 7 train, was supposed to be empty except for essential personnel. But halfway through the journey, Elara noticed something wrong. The air had shifted. The soft clatter of wheels suddenly acquired a rhythm too deliberate. 2 cars ahead, she sensed movement. Not wandering passengers. Coordinated. They were here. Ghost Unit. Officially disbanded, unofficially erased. Unofficially, very much alive. Elara swallowed hard. She had read rumors in old Allied intercepts. Ghost Unit operatives were trained to erase people, not positions. The kind you never saw. The kind you only realized existed right before you died. She reached under her coat for her service pistol. The lights flickered. The train plunged into black. And the screams began. The ambush. Elara pushed forward, her boots slicing through the dark corridor. Hands brushed the wall, pistol up, breathing shallow. She counted the bodies by touch. Crew members she had spoken to minutes earlier now slumped on the floor, still warm but unmoving. Then she heard them. A whisper of metal. One step behind her. She twisted, firing blind. Sparks burst where her bullet hit steel. A gloved hand wrapped around her throat from behind, squeezing, lifting her off her feet. She clawed at the fingers, her vision narrowing. "Stop," a voice rasped. "We only need the cipher." Elara choked out, "You can't read it." Silence. Then a low laugh. "We don't need to understand it. Only to ensure the world never does." The grip tightened. The unseen ally, the door behind them slid open with a violent clang. A flash. A loud crack. The hand around her throat loosened, then dropped away entirely. The Ghost Unit operative collapsed with a hole clean through his visor. Elara fell to her knees, gasping, and looked up to see Captain Hale, she whispered. The man she thought had died in the ambush at Iron Valley stood before her, breathing hard, weapon raised. His coat was torn, face bruised, eyes fierce. "Ghost Unit didn't kill me," he said. "They tried. But they don't know how to kill a man who has nothing left to lose." Elara stared. Hale had been her mentor, the officer whose strategic brilliance was matched only by his willingness to break orders. He had vanished months ago. "Why save me?" she asked. "Because you have something they fear," he said quietly. "Something that terrifies even the governments hiding behind polished languages and polished lies." His eyes drifted to the satchel chained to her wrist. "The Cipher of Ghosts," he said. "You finally found it." The truth emerged as the train screeched to a stop inside an abandoned mountain tunnel. The doors hissed open, revealing a cold wind that cut like knives. Hale motioned her out, the two fled into the pitch-dark cavern. "Tell me what you know," Elara demanded, holding her pistol steady. "I know," Hale said, "that the cipher is not a message, it's a confession." "A confession?" "To the real motive behind the war. Not territory. Not ideology. Not alliances." He paused. "But a secret operation that predates every treaty ever signed." Elara blinked. "Operation, what?" "I'll tell you," Hale answered, "only if you're ready to carry it. Because once you know, Ghost Unit becomes the least of your problems." Wind howled down the tunnel. Elara nodded. Hale reached into his coat and pulled out a battered notebook, the same notebook he carried before he disappeared. He flipped it open and pointed at a symbol. A circle split by 7 lines. She recognized it. It was identical to the symbol on the cipher. "What is that?" Elara whispered. "A signature," Hale said. "Left behind by a faction inside every nation, Allied, Axis, Neutral. A group historians later called the Shadow Accord, though the real name was never publicly known." Elara's heartbeat stumbled. "And the cipher?" "It exposes their creation," Hale said. "Their plan. Their purpose for letting wars start, and for stopping them when they no longer serve their design." Elara shivered. "Why didn't you reveal it before?" Hale's shoulders sank. "Because nobody would believe it. And those who didn't live long enough to speak." A sharp crack echoed, rifle fire. Hale shoved her behind a rock formation. "They found us," he growled. "More Ghost Unit operatives. Maybe half the squad." Elara peeked. Shadowy shapes moved down the tunnel, silent, coordinated, hunting. Hale checked his ammo. "We won't outrun them." She swallowed. "So what's the plan?" Hale met her eyes grimly. "We make the world hear the cipher before they silence us." "How?" He pointed upward at a rusted ladder leading toward a faint glimmer. "That shaft connects to an old telegraph station. If we can reach it, I can send the cipher's contents to every intelligence office left standing." Elara looked back at the descending hunters. "There are too many." Hale clenched his jaw. "That's why you're going alone." "The sacrifice, no," Elara said instantly. "I'm not leaving you." Hale gave her a tired smile. "You're the only one who can decode that message. I'm just a soldier. You're more than that." Footsteps echoed closer. We're out of time, Hale said. He grabbed her shoulders. Go. She shook her head violently. Hale pulled a pin from a grenade. I'll buy you 60 seconds. Her breath stopped. Hale, tell them, he said softly, tell the world what they tried to erase. He threw the grenade, grabbed his rifle, and charged the oncoming shadows with a roar that shook the entire cavern. Elara climbed the ladder with burning hands and blurred vision. The explosion below illuminated the tunnel like an artificial sunrise. The Cipher of Ghosts thudded against her wrist with every step. Whatever the message held, it had cost Hale his life. And she would make sure the world understood why. Snow whipped across the abandoned telegraph station as Elara Voss climbed through the rusted exit hatch, her breath fogging in the icy dawn. Behind her, deep within the mountain, the echoes of Captain Hale's last stand still trembled through her bones. Every step she took away from the tunnel felt like betrayal. But every beat of the satchel chained to her wrist reminded her why she couldn't stop. The Cipher of Ghosts wasn't just a message. It was a detonator. And the war wasn't what the world thought it was. Elara pressed her ear to the wind. No voices, no engines. Only the shriek of winter cutting across the empty valley. She made her way toward the telegraph station's warped wooden door, half buried in snow. If Hale was right, inside was the last working line connected to the Allied intelligence grid. If he was wrong. She didn't let herself finish the thought. The station with no lights inside, darkness swallowed everything but the thin sliver of morning leaking through cracks in the walls. Dust blanketed the old machinery. Coiled wires hung like dead vines. A telegraph key sat on a desk beside a cracked headset. Elara scanned the room. No footprints. No signs of recent use. But the switchboard hummed faintly. Alive. Her heart jumped. She darted to the main communication panel and pulled off her gloves. The metal was freezing against her skin as she flipped open the junction box. Power was low, but enough. Enough to broadcast. Enough to expose the secret that men had died to protect. She unfolded the parchment. The Cipher of Ghosts stared back at her, 7 fragmented symbols, 1 jagged line of encrypted text, and a signature in ink darker than time. She reached for her decoder wheel. Then she froze. There were footsteps outside. Crunching in the snow. Slow. Deliberate. Hunting. Her pulse slammed in her ears. She extinguished her light and dropped behind a cabinet, pistol drawn. The door creaked open. A silhouette filled the frame. A tall man. Hands raised. Elara, he said softly. It's me. Her breath caught. Commander Wren? He stepped into the faint daylight. Uniform torn, face bruised, eyes filled with exhaustion, and something else she couldn't name. Relief? Fear? Guilt? How did you find me? She asked. Wren exhaled a cloud of frost. Because I'm the one who sent Hale to protect you. I knew Ghost Unit was close. Closer than we realized. Elara's grip on her pistol loosened but did not lower. Hale told me about the Shadow Accord, she said. About what the cipher exposes. Wren shut the door behind him. Then you understand why we need to finish this. Quickly. Before they surround us. They're already here, Elara whispered. Wren nodded grimly. Then let's begin. The decoding. They sat at the telegraph desk, the cold gnawing at their bones. Wren pulled wires aside while Elara positioned the parchment beneath the dim light. She rotated the decoder wheel. The first symbol aligned. A letter emerged. Then another. Soon the jagged scribbles were giving way to a sentence, broken but decipherable. And as it took shape, a chill deeper than the winter storm crawled through Elara's chest. It wasn't a tactical plan. It wasn't a military directive. It wasn't even written like a wartime document. It was a vow. Signed in collective secrecy by generals, ministers, financiers, and intelligence chiefs from nations supposedly at odds. Elara read the translation aloud, barely recognizing her own voice. War cleanses. War resets. We ignite it when the world grows stagnant. And we silence it when the world grows wise. Her stomach twisted. Another line surfaced: the people must never know the architects of their own suffering. Her hands shook. This wasn't the work of a faction. It was a pact. A pact older than the war itself. Her eyes traveled to the final piece, the symbol linking the signatories. The circle split by 7 lines. The Shadow Accord. A secret alliance behind every flag. You understand now, Ren murmured. Elara looked at him sharply. Understand what? That the truth will destroy the world, he said quietly. And the world is not ready to be destroyed. Something in his voice changed. Flattened. Hardened. Elara's blood cooled. Ren, why are you talking like that? He didn't answer. Instead, he slowly placed his hand on the satchel chain around her wrist. Elara, he said, give me the cipher. The betrayal unfolded. She jerked her hand back. No, Elara, you're one of them. His silence was confirmation enough. After all this time, she choked. You were working for the Accord? I work for peace, Ren said, rising to his feet. Real peace. The kind the public cannot create for themselves. The kind forged by those who see farther and understand more. You mean the kind enforced through war, Elara spat. Ren's jaw tightened. If you send that message, you won't save the world, he said. You'll fracture it. You'll collapse governments, ignite revolutions, millions will die. Maybe more. Then why create the cipher, she demanded. To remind future commanders of our duty, he said. Not for the world. For us. For those who shape it. Elara's voice cracked. And Hale? Ren looked down. Hale was loyal. But loyalty is fragile when weighed against truth. When he found out what the cipher meant, he chose you over the Accord. Her heart shattered. You killed him. Ren didn't deny it. Elara raised her pistol. Stay back. Ren held out both hands calmly. If you shoot me, more will come. If you send that message, even more will come. You can't win, Elara. But you can choose the path that saves the most lives. I'm choosing the path that tells the truth, she said. Elara, she slammed her fist onto the telegraph key. Dots and dashes sang through the cold air. Ren lunged. Elara fired. A gunshot cracked. And Ren staggered, falling to his knees, blood blossoming across his coat. Elara, he breathed, eyes clouding with pain, you've doomed everything. No, she whispered, tears breaking free. I've finally started something. Outside, engines growled. Snow churned. More operatives. Ghost unit. Elara grabbed the cipher, wrapped it in her coat, and ran toward the rear exit as Ren collapsed beside the telegraph desk. Behind her, the station lights flickered. The message had gone through. To every intelligence hub left standing. Millions would soon know. But the Accord would not let that happen easily. And Elara had just declared war on the invisible empire that had been orchestrating every conflict for generations. The mountains trembled as if aware of the secret now circulating through the world. Elara's boots crunched against the frostbitten rocks as she descended from the telegraph station. The cipher burned against her chest, a fragile thread connecting her to the knowledge that would topple empires. Behind her, the distant echoes of Ghost Unit, organized, merciless, inhuman, tracked her every move. Hale's sacrifice weighed on her like a stone in the gut. She had promised she'd carry the truth forward, yet every step toward survival felt like betrayal. And in the distance, the first tendrils of a storm were forming, dark clouds rising over the valley like judgment itself. The hunt intensifies. Elara had barely gone a kilometer before the first warning arrived, a flare of light from a broken communication tower atop a ridge. Someone knew she had transmitted the cipher. Someone always knew. From the shadows, Ghost Unit emerged again, silent, uniform, but distorted in the peripheral vision, as if they weren't entirely human. Their footsteps left no marks. Their weapons gleamed in the fading light. They had no hesitation. No mercy. Elara ducked behind a crag of ice-laden rock, pistol poised, mind racing. Every strategy she had studied in training, every trick Hale had drilled into her, felt insufficient. But the one advantage she still held was knowledge. The Accord couldn't erase what she had already sent. They could only silence her. And now they would try. The secret allies. She reached the old supply road where Hale had told her a small resistance cell waited. A makeshift banner marked the path, a black triangle split by a single line. The symbol matched the cipher's initial fragments. Inside a ruined barn, two figures greeted her cautiously, Captain Leif Arndt and Sergeant Mara Kjell, operatives who had been trained under Hale, hidden for months in the frozen highlands. "Elara," Leif said, voice low, "we knew they'd send Ghost Unit. We've been tracking them too. They're faster, but they aren't invincible." Mara handed her a new weapon, its barrel etched with faint symbols that glowed slightly in the dusk. "It disrupts resonance synchronization," she said. "Use it wisely." Elara examined the weapon. It was experimental. Unstable. Yet the only chance she had of reaching the city alive, and ensuring the cipher survived. She nodded. "Then let's move." The city edge. The trio moved through forests and snow-swept plains, avoiding patrols and collapsing infrastructure. Every few hours, Elara rechecked the transmission, confirming that fragments of the cipher were circulating through hidden Allied channels. But she knew the Accord's reach was vast. Entire governments could be manipulated to suppress the message. By dusk, they reached the outskirts of Kielstadt, a city half in ruin, half under secret Accord control. Smoke rose from factories abandoned decades earlier. The streets were silent, except for the occasional patrol of Accord-trained guards. Mara leaned in. "Once we enter, the city becomes a trap. They know the routes, the alleys, every building. They'll be waiting." Leif exhaled sharply. "We only have one shot. Get to the main transmitter in the city hall. Then everything changes." Elara's hand tightened on the cipher satchel. She thought of Hale, of the telegraph station, and whispered, "For you." The first strike. They moved quickly, sticking to shadows, weaving through broken streets. Then it happened. A volley of rifles cracked across a narrow alley, bullets ricocheting off the walls. Ghost Unit had anticipated them. Leif dove behind a pile of debris, returning fire. Mara fired the experimental weapon, and a pulse of blue light surged, distorting the incoming soldiers' movements. Some staggered, some vanished entirely, but more kept coming. Elara felt her chest tighten. Every heartbeat was synchronized to the pounding pulse of the assault. A Ghost Unit operative lunged at her, gloved hands gripping her shoulders. She activated the pulse weapon. The world blurred. The operative fell backward, but the pulse radiated outward, striking other enemies in a wave of distortion. Hale's lessons came back: precision, focus, no hesitation. Elara sprinted. The final transmission. City Hall loomed. Its glass shattered, stone facade scarred with shrapnel. Inside, the old emergency transmitter station still functioned, powered by a hidden generator that had escaped years of destruction. Elara connected the cipher to the main console. Her fingers flew over the keys. Codes streamed, encrypted signals cascading into Allied networks, into global channels. Behind her, Ghost Unit poured through the doors. Leif and Mara held them off as she transmitted, every second a lifetime, every heartbeat a war. By the time the last line of code was entered, the world would have access to the full cipher. The truth of the Shadow Accord, the orchestration of war, the secret manipulations spanning continents and decades, it was all about to be revealed. The door behind her burst open. Ghost Unit poured in like smoke. Elara braced herself. And then she heard it, a voice, distorted, metallic, echoing in the hall. "Stop her. She must not succeed." It was Ren. A moment of choice. Elara turned. The figure stood in the doorway, shadows flickering across his bruised face. He raised a weapon. "You can't stop it," she said. "It's already done. Hale gave me the chance." Ren's expression faltered. His hand shook. For the first time, doubt crept into the Accord's enforcer. Elara whispered to herself, almost inaudibly, "By the way, if you're clinging to this moment with me, make sure to hit subscribe, more waits just ahead." She didn't have time to dwell. Ren lunged. The pulse weapon fired. Blue energy struck him in mid-motion. He staggered, caught in the disruptive field, unable to continue. Outside, the world had already begun receiving the message. And somewhere, in distant capitals, the first signs of shock began to ripple through governments, intelligence agencies, and military commands alike. Elara collapsed to the floor, chest heaving, eyes burning. Leif and Mara were at her side. The world had changed. But the Accord would retaliate. And the Shadow Accord always strikes back. The city skyline burned with reflected sunrise. Smoke and haze twisted through the streets as if the world itself had exhaled in shock. Elara stepped onto the balcony of the city hall, clutching the now empty Cipher satchel. Its secrets were no longer hers alone. They had been transmitted, scattered across networks, encrypted channels, and hidden Allied stations worldwide. She had survived. Hale's sacrifice had not been in vain. Leif and Mara were alive beside her, but she knew this was only the beginning. The Shadow Accord would not accept defeat quietly. And yet, for the first time in weeks, she allowed herself to breathe. The aftermath of truth across the globe, intelligence agencies were reeling. Signals carried the cipher to command centers, encrypted but decipherable. Analysts and historians would later claim it was a leak, a coincidence, an accidental transmission, but those who read it knew better. The war's orchestration, the hidden manipulations, the secret pacts, it was all exposed. Governments scrambled. Soldiers and politicians alike were forced to face truths buried for decades. Fear rippled through corridors of power. The Shadow Accord's influence, thought absolute, had been pierced by one determined soldier with a cipher. Elara had changed history. The Shadow Accord strikes, but victory was short-lived. From the darkness of abandoned streets, from hidden offices in capitals and secret chambers in mountains, the Accord struck back. Elite units, faceless enforcers, and operatives like Ren spread outward, hunting the messengers, the witnesses, the cipher holders. Elara knew they were coming. She had no illusions. "We need to disappear," Leif said, scanning the horizon for any sign of movement. "They'll trace the signals back here." Mara added, "We can't stay. The Accord will retaliate harder than they ever have." Elara nodded. She understood. The battle was won, but the war for truth had just begun. The final confrontation, the first attack, came at dusk. Ghost unit operatives, faster and more disciplined than any normal human, moved through the streets. Elara, Leif, and Mara engaged them with every tool at their disposal: the experimental pulse weapon, guerrilla tactics, improvised explosives. Amid the chaos, Elara spotted a figure she hoped she would never see again: Ren, alive, cloaked in shadow, holding a blade that seemed designed to slice through both flesh and will. "End this now, Voss," he called, voice cold but edged with desperation. "Destroy the cipher. Let it die." Elara's fingers tightened around her weapon. "I can't. Hale gave me this chance. Millions will die if I don't." Ren's eyes flickered with a fleeting hesitation. And in that brief moment, Elara acted. A pulse surged from the weapon, catching Ren in the resonance field. He fell, writhing, caught in the energy that warped his body and mind. Elara knew she hadn't killed him, but she had incapacitated the most dangerous enforcer of the Accord. The world reacts by nightfall. News feeds flickered with anomalies, unexplained transmissions, data dumps, and encrypted files suddenly accessible to analysts. Truths about hidden alliances, manipulations, and wartime strategies leaked simultaneously worldwide. Governments scrambled to respond, journalists struggled to verify, and historians were forced to confront the hidden fabric of war. Elara, watching from the rooftop, realized the sheer scale of what she had unleashed. The Shadow Accord would fracture, but its remnants would survive, reorganize, and strike again. But the world now had a chance to see what was hidden. Elara's resolve. Hale's face returned to her memory, every lesson he had taught her, every sacrifice he had made. She whispered into the night, history will remember the truth. Not the lies. Not the shadows. The truth. Leaf joined her, glancing toward the distant mountains. And the accord? They will come, Elara said. But we will be ready. We have the cipher, the knowledge, and the will. They won't control the story again. Mara put a hand on her shoulder. Then we move. Before they regroup. Elara nodded, feeling the weight of responsibility, and the quiet determination that had carried her through impossible nights and battles. The secrets that remain even with the cipher transmitted, not every secret would ever be revealed. Some things were too dangerous to publicize fully. Some truths would remain hidden in archives, buried beneath layers of deception and classified orders. But 7 key truths, the ones Hale, Elara, and those who had sacrificed everything new, had been unveiled. The true orchestrators of the war remained hidden from public view. Experiments like the resonance device existed, manipulating soldiers and civilians alike. Entire villages and battalions were erased or repurposed in secret operations. Elite units like Ghost Unit enforced secrecy with absolute precision. Secret alliances, the Shadow Accord, manipulated conflicts for decades. Courageous individuals like Hale risked everything to protect the truth. And finally, the world could now choose, live in ignorance or face the hidden reality. Elara looked to the horizon. The dawn was breaking. Snow still clung to the mountains. Smoke drifted from distant cities. A storm had passed. But the war for truth would never end. She drew a deep breath, tightened the strap of her satchel, and stepped into the streets. Because history, untold, manipulated, and hidden, had finally begun to fight back.